Well, welcome, Cristina. Welcome to ISHI 35.
Thank you.
Nice to see you again.
I'm excited to be here with you. We missed you last year.
Aw, thanks. That's so sweet. I missed you too. So what kind of things did you bring to ISHI 35 with you this year?
So I will be presenting a case tomorrow at the General Sessions, and it's about the Indianapolis Slasher, who we finally were able to identify almost after 50 years. So it's a really exciting case. I'm really glad to be able to share this and the technology we used with everybody, because I think it's something that, although this was a cold case, you don't have to use it for cold cases. You can use it for current cases too. So it was a great story and a great conclusion.
Who was involved? Like, who helped out? Who collaborated?
Yeah, so Ashley Flowers actually funded the case. She raised thousands of dollars for this case. And we did the genealogy work ourselves in-house. And obviously the Indianapolis Police Department were involved. And their laboratory actually generated the DNA extract that was originally taken from some of the samples. And they sent that extract to us, and we did the genealogy testing ourselves in-house, and were able to provide the answers, luckily for them. But it was a big collaborative effort between a number of agencies and several different cold case detectives who worked it over the years. So we were just a small part of a big puzzle.
That's amazing. I love that camaraderie that there is in the world of forensics, people helping people all the time. So what were these samples that they sent to you? Had they ever been analyzed before?
So they had.
Okay.
Yes, so they had been analyzed years ago, and a DNA profile was developed, and it was foreign to the victim. So in particular, in this case, we had a DNA profile from a handkerchief that was at the scene and from the underwear of one of the victims. And that foreign DNA profile previously been uploaded into CODIS with no hits.
Wow.
So they were kind of a little bit at a dead end. They had this profile, but they had no one to compare it to. And I think that's where a lot of times from some of these cases, you'll get a good DNA profile and you're just like, oh, perfect, let's see if it hits. But if it doesn't hit, what do you do? So that's where genealogy is kind of taking us, where it's allowing us another avenue to hopefully find a family member that will lead us to ultimately the individual we're looking for.
So in this case, looking at that genealogy, did it come from a third cousin? I mean, how did it actually end up leading you to the perpetrator?
Yeah, so we ended up looking at, it was kind of like a grandparent-grandchild relationship, possible aunt-uncle type situation, but we actually, building out the entire tree, we ended up building back a daughter and a son. So it was a half daughter and a half son. And those were able to lead us to, ultimately we did paternity testing, and that's how we verified that it was this individual. And he'd actually passed. So he passed a few years after the murders had occurred. But yeah, we were able to take that daughter and that son's profile. So they were only related by him, but they had different mothers. But yeah, that's how we were able to confirm that it was him.
What a phenomenal story.
Yeah.
And now this is just obviously one story, right?
Yes.
That has led to this. Can you tell me about another case? Like, what's another instance?
There's so many. I think all of this really kicked off probably years ago with the Golden State Killer. I think that's the one most people know about.
Yeah.
And that's where it I felt like, internationally all over the place known that this technology existed. But we've had other cases that were solved as well. We had a case, one of our first cases we solved using Kintelligence, which is the kit that we used, was out of Oregon, and it was two guys were out on a boat years ago, and they, ran into some trouble on the water, and they capsized. And one of them, they found this body right away, but the other one was never found. And so we got remains in a few years ago to do genealogy testing, because these remains, they didn't know who they were, and they ended up being this individual. And, sometimes with genealogy, it can be very challenging because there's not a lot of information, but sometimes people are really active on social media and things like that. They make it a little bit easier to find somebody. And in some of our cases, that's been the case. We see, oh, missing, we don't know where you are, missing, we miss you, things like that. So. Yeah.
It's interesting. So how do you find out about these cases? Like, is someone bringing them to you guys, or do you have to actively go search for them?
Yeah, So it's a combination of different things. You know, places like ISHI are actually great, or AFS, or any of these big scientific conferences, because whether they're science-based or they're, you know, more police-based, we get to tell people about our technologies and let them know it's a choice for their case. We also collaborate with a lot of people like Seasons of Justice, who are able to provide funding for some of these cases as well. But yeah, there's a lot of different avenues. We do get phone calls from people sometimes. Sometimes you will get calls from a detective who says, I want genealogy, and I'll say, you have a 5-person mixture. You do not get genealogy. You know, everyone hears about it and wants it for their case. So sometimes we do get those random calls, but, you know, in general, we just try to educate them. You know, maybe we can't do it for this case, but have you tested this other evidence? You know, what else can we do? So
That's pretty impressive. So at your place, how many different services do you provide? Like what do you do as a whole?
Yeah, we have a lot of different services at our laboratory. So we do the standard STR testing that most crime labs do. We have YSTRs as well and mitoDNA. We do the genealogy testing from start to finish. So we actually do the SNP testing in-house now.
Oh, wow.
So that's something we brought online a few years ago. But we've been doing genealogy for even longer than that, the actual research. And we have a whole team of genealogists on staff that handle that. We also have some fun sampling techniques. So we sample spent shell casings for DNA. We have the MVAC, which is like a fancy vacuum for DNA that we use. And, you know, some of those techniques we're using for current cases, and some we're using for the colder cases that have already been tested, but haven't been able to yield results yet. And we're trying to go back and get more results from them.
This is just because I don't know. Spent casings, right?
Yes.
Obviously, somebody touched that, so there's some touch DNA. They put that, they loaded it, right?
Yes.
But then they fired it.
Yes.
And then if they found that casing, somebody has dusted it for prints or something else. How difficult is that then to get the DNA from that type of item?
Yes.
How can you do it?
It's very difficult because, like you mentioned, it's fired, so it's exposed to heat in that moment.
Yeah.
And then even though someone loads it into a gun, they don't have the same amount of contact that they actually have with the physical gun.
Right.
So it's usually, you know, pretty brief contact, then it's been through heat. And then, you know, when you find it at a scene, how long has it been sitting there? Is it in the sun? Is it in the rain where you could degrade that DNA further? So we tell people for those casings, we actually recommend we don't send it to fingerprints first, or we don't send it to ballistics first, because oftentimes when they're processing those samples, they don't wear gloves. Which is a problem for us because we'll pick up their DNA. And or if they're fingerprinting and they don't change the brushes between or the powder, you could cross-contaminate for DNA, and we don't want that as well. So we actually tell them to send us the casings first. We'll really quickly do our technique, and then we'll send it right back to you, and then you can immediately go to ballistics. Or if you have like 50 casings, we don't need all 50. Don't send us all 50, please.
Right.
But we'll take like 10 of them, and then you can have the other 40, and you can run ballistics on those.
So in a cold case, you may have some casings that showed up and they might be stored somewhere and they were fingerprinted. Can you still get a sample, or does that ruin it completely?
We don't recommend testing that, because at that point, you probably are just going to pick up the person who processed it.
Yep.
Can you technically test it? Of course, but you would definitely want the elimination profile from the technician that processed it. It's just a little bit harder, unfortunately, with that, because, you know, even if you get a profile, like we talked about, if there's cross-contamination, you know, if I'm a defense attorney, that's the first thing I'm going to say is, oh, well, my client wasn't on that. He was on something else completely unrelated, you know, so.
Yep, that's tricky. So where do you see, like, your technology and your abilities growing into the future?
Well, I don't know if you heard, but we actually just acquired Intermountain Forensics.
Did actually hear
Did
that?
you hear that?
Yes, I did.
So we're very excited. They're a very like-minded group, and now we're all just one big DLI family. But that just gave us the ability to bring online whole genome sequencing. So that's kind of another tool in our belt that we can hopefully use to help solve more of these cases. Beyond that, I can only imagine the sky is the limit. You know, that's one thing we love at DNA Labs International is new technology. So I can't even tell you what the next few years will bring, but I'm excited to see it and be a part of it. So.
That's great. And I've been asking this question of many people. What in the world, how do we get people to be uploaded to GEDmatch or to any of the other databases? How do we make that occur?
So I know that's been a struggle for years, and to try to get people to upload, and everyone's kind of suspicious about what we're doing with
Right.
DNA.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing is educating the public, trying to get the word out there, get the actual information out there to them, and hopefully they'll start to trust the system a little bit more and realize it's not for nefarious reasons. We're not going to do anything weird with your DNA, and really ultimately at the end of the day, we're doing this to help solve these crimes, to help make the community a better place and get answers for victims. That's, I think, everyone's goal here. So we can only do that, though, if we have the tools that we need. So hopefully, growing that database is definitely a priority. I know some of the vendors are having different events at different places to get people to sign up.
Yeah.
So hopefully by continuing to do that and educating the public, that will help to grow that database even more.
That's awesome. Well, Cristina, thank you so
Yes.
much for sitting down and chatting with me
course.
today.
Yes.
Here at ISHI 35, will I see you in ISHI 36?
Oh, definitely. I wouldn't miss it.
Excellent.
It's in our backyard in West Palm Beach.
yeah, that's
So, yeah,
great.
we'll
Yeah,
just be right up there.
Drive over.
Exactly. Thank
That's
you.
awesome. Thank
So
you.
good to see you.
Thank you.